Was the week before Christmas and Waynell uploaded a lesson video on Friday. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you're here. It is the most wonderful time of the year, filled with the sights, the smells, the sounds, and yes, the activities of Christmas. I, like you, have been caught up in the busyness of it all, but hopefully this lesson will be a nice reminder of our response and how important it is for us to stop and make those connections of how we respond to the most wonderful time of the year, and that is indeed the birth of Christ. I know that we've heard it time and time again, but it is true that wise men still seek him, and we're going to talk about it in today's video. Let's go.
Sunday. It's Sunday school.
Regal Response to a Holy Light is our international lesson title for Sunday, December 22nd. My name is Waynell Henson. You know me as That Sunday School Girl, and for 5 years I've been in this space changing the way that people see Sunday school. I'm excited about this week's lesson. I think that I've shared with many of you that as we go through these holiday lessons, I really like to ask God to allow me to see the Christmas story, even Bible stories from my children's Bible. I want to see them in new and powerful and meaningful ways. And especially in this week's lesson, as we're in this quarter talking about the call of God, we are continuing to layer onto our conversation and learn what it means to be called as we explore God's call in the New Testament. But before we get into the lesson, you already know that there are some special people that I need to say hello to, and those are the folks who are new around here. If that's you, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. I'm so glad that you are here. Look down below. Make sure that you click the subscribe button so that you get connected to the community. There's also a notifications bell. Click that so that you don't miss any content when it's uploaded. There are currently at least 3 videos a week. We start on Markup Monday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. I go live here on YouTube, and literally hundreds of teachers from all over the world join as we preview the lesson. We use a template that I share as a free template for you to create your own lesson study plan. And then we come back either on this video where you review, or maybe you'll want to join me on Sunday mornings when I still go live at 9:45 a.m. Central Time for those who are not back into the traditional brick and mortar of worship, or maybe your church is still not having Sunday school in this pandemic time, and you can join us. It is an awesome space. And then I do a video for young people that sort of puts the lesson in a conversation that they will understand. But this is a beautiful community. We're glad that you're here. We hope that you will not only join it, but be giving to it as well. And you're going to gain so much. This week, I had an awesome opportunity to share technology training for Sunday school leaders. About 70 people joined me on a Zoom call on this Tuesday night. It was absolutely fantastic. If you would be interested in possibly catching the replay of that video or asking me, hey, Waynell, are you going to do that again? Leave me a comment below, or maybe email me and let me know. I'm trying to make some decisions about how I want to share that, because it was an awesome training. And now every single one of those teachers already has their lesson completely planned out for this week with games and activities. They literally, at the close of that session, received that lesson. So they are ready to go this Sunday morning. So there are at least 70 Sunday schools around the country that should be super awesome on this Sunday before Christmas. In the spirit of that, if you are joining me this Sunday, it is going to be ugly sweater, ugly mask, and in my case, I'm wearing an ugly dress, ugly Christmas dress Sunday. So ugly Christmas sweater, mask, or dress, or top Sunday. So if you're joining, please make sure that, here's the flyer for it, make sure that you are wearing your ugly item. I'm also really excited because this week, for the very first time, I am going to have a Zoom interaction as a part of our Sunday morning. So if you are interested in joining the Zoom, the information is right there on the flyer. You can also visit my, I guess I need to put it on the website, but you can also visit my social media spaces on Facebook and Instagram. The Zoom is open. So the first 99 people, I make 100. The first 99 to join the Zoom are welcome to come in. However, if you join the Zoom, there are no wallflowers on Zoom. So I would ask you to please have on something festive, even if you're not participating in the ugly sweater mask contest. And yes, there is a contest. We will have prizes. We're going to vote for who has the best, and we're going to give prizes. But I will ask you to look festive. You are agreeing that I am streaming this on YouTube, so people will see you. And finally, no wallflowers. There are no wallflowers in the Zoom. So if you show up, be prepared to participate. And that could be anything from read to answer a question to just giving your perspective or even sharing background. So if you're present, you are participating, it's going to be fantastic. Other than that, I could continue all day long, but I know we have a great lesson that we need to get into. So make sure that you've got your Bibles, your pens, your handy dandy notebooks. If you want my notes, the TSSG notes, they've actually been posted since Tuesday. They're listed down below. They're the first link in the description box. You can grab it there. Oh, one more thing before I go. Please leave a comment about this video if it's been a blessing or if you just want to say hello and happy holidays. Finally, I need everyone. It is so important that you click that thumbs up like button. All right. Please, please, please click the thumbs up like button. Other than that, it's time for us to get into this lesson. Our lesson title is A Regal Response to a Holy Light. The Bible basis is Matthew chapter 2, verses 7 through 15. The Bible truth. The wise men honor the child Jesus by presenting gifts to him. Our memory verse is verse 11, and the lesson aim is that we will agree that the wise men point to the universality of Jesus' mission. Grieve for those who suffer innocently due to the world's brokenness and sin, and join with people of every ethnicity and culture to worship Jesus, the King of all nations. As we explore this week's lesson, it is very easy for many of us to default to our traditional idea of what we think the nativity or the Christmas scene must have looked like. Now, in my opinion, that's shaped by a couple of things. We have sort of these commercial influences like holiday cards and yard displays, but many of us also have experiences as young people growing up in churches who participated in Christmas programs and pageants, and no pageant was complete without a visit by the wise men to the stable. And of course, that meant the wise men in their costumes, as simple as a towel tied around a neck, as elaborate as very nice velvet robes that had been made. In many churches, I think my own may have been guilty a couple of years, and yours probably was too. You had those crowns from Burger King. But in this week's lesson, I believe that we'll have a chance to see the wise men in a very different way. And I know that God is maturing us as we go through this lesson study, which is really about God's call. And I believe that the response of the wise men causes us to really think about our own response to the Christ. But more importantly, it really focuses us on our why we are here. We exist to bring glory to the King. When you think about your own call, it is to bring glory to the King in what you do. Now, we're going to see the wise men bring glory to him in the form of their worship, but we also have an opportunity to not only bring our worship to the King, but to bring glory to God in the things that we do every single day. We are in the second chapter of Matthew again. This is our third week in the book of Matthew. So we know that he is writing to Jewish believers like himself. We know that he has set the groundwork for what he is going to prove throughout this entire book. And that is that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. We've been through the genealogy of Jesus Christ. We know that he was born of a virgin. And now here we are. And in chapter 2, there is news. And the big news is that there is a new king that has been born. And chapter 2 tells us about things that happened after the king was born. Now, by the time we get to our printed text, we know that Jesus is already home. We know that from verse 11, where the wise men actually get to the house where Jesus is. They're not visiting at a stable. They're not in the manger, at the manger scene. Now, that's going to kind of shake a few of us because we've always learned it that way. But a very different scene when you dig into it and you actually see that the visitors have come to the house and they've come to worship. We also, we can't pinpoint exactly the age of Jesus, but we guesstimate that he's about 2 years old. At this point, Mary has already made her purification offering according to Leviticus 12:6-8. And we also know that there were different types of purification offerings. You would bring a lamb if you were wealthy, and you would bring a pigeon or a turtle dove if you didn't have as much money. Mary gave the offering of the poor. So that's how we also know that the wise men were not present when Jesus was a little bitty baby, because had she had the wealth and the resources that the wise men brought as gifts, she would have given a more substantive offering. So it's interesting as well that Matthew never mentions the manger. So as these individuals, as people learn about Jesus, as you consider all of chapter 2, there are really sort of three kinds of responses to Jesus. We're talking about a regal response to a holy light. What is a response? It is the reaction that is provoked as a result of something happening. So what reactions do we see provoked as a result of the Christ being born? Well, we see people who came to worship. We see someone who was very worried. And then we see people who were not concerned at all. This is all in sort of your background context. Let's go quickly through that. We're going to explore the story of the Magi, the wise men who actually come to worship Jesus. Herod is present in this scene, and he's the one who was worried or concerned. And then the advisors around Herod, they knew about the Christ. They knew what the Old Testament said in terms of his prophecy. They even knew where he was to be born. And yet there was no response in them like the response of the wise men that caused them to pursue the Christ. I give you very, very substantive background about the worship, the warrior, and the man that I'm not too concerned group in your TSSG notes. Again, you can download those below. It is a very interesting and yet necessary background that helps us understand our printed text. Now, let's talk very quickly about Herod before we get into verse 7. In fact, it's important for verse 7 to note that Herod is the king at this time. And the king now hears that this baby has been born. He's like the original Christmas Grinch. He is not at all happy about the Christ child being born because he realizes that that poses a threat to his leadership. He knows that he is not the legitimate person to sit on the throne. And so this Christ child does pose a threat to him. And he begins to react in ways that people react when their positions or their titles or their opportunities feel threatened and they are not secure in who they are. So because he knows he did not obtain that position in the right way, we learn earlier in chapter 2 that he is disturbed. He is disturbed. Now, in verses 7 and 8, then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the young child. And when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also." Now, we've learned earlier in chapter 2 that these wise men are from the east. They have seen a star and they began to follow it. These wise men, I know that we often learn of them as kings. In your study, you've probably seen different commentary, and I do not believe them to be kings. I know that they are leaders. They are men who would have been given to the STEM program. They were scientists, mathematicians. They understood astronomy and astrology. And they also knew that this was to be the sign that this child had been born. So they began to follow this sign. They were asking where. Earlier in chapter 2, they have asked, where is this Christ child? That's actually how they get to Herod. They come into Jerusalem. They've been following a star. And on some level, it seems like they get a little bit lost. They're a little bit turned around. They're not very far off the path, but they need a little bit of direction. And so they ask where, and then they ask actually where they've gotten lost. They're trying to find where the child is. And so they now have had this encounter with Herod, who again now is tipped off that the child has been born, that these men are looking for him. And Herod is, again, he's a brilliant leader. He has built great cities. He's done really great things, and yet he struggles internally because he's not secure in who he is. He's not secure in his own leadership, and he also has anger issues. He just seems to fly off the handle, and when he gets really upset about a thing, it typically means that someone is going to die. His temper is so hot that he's had his wife killed, his sons, his mother-in-law, and people around, everyone in the city knows what happens when Herod is not happy. And so when we see that everyone in the city is concerned, that is why, because they understand that when Herod flies off the handle, everything else seems to just go awry. We also know this, though, that Herod knew the prophecy that the Messiah was to come. He sort of always walked with this looking over his shoulder fear. When is it going to happen? Who's going to take my seat? And now this moment has come. And not only does he know that there's a prophecy, but we have to conclude that he believes it. If you didn't believe it, you would not be so threatened, or you would not behave in such erratic ways to what you know as fact. And so we know that he believes that the Messiah has been born. In fact, in verse 4, he asked the question of his own people surrounding him, his own staff, where would this Messiah be born? And they were able to go back into the Old Testament and tell him exactly where the Christ would be born. The wise men are asking where is this child to be born? Now, let me insert something for those of you who are a bit visual like me. When the wise men came into Jerusalem, this would not have been a quiet thing. Why? Because they were traveling as a caravan. They would have come in with camels, and the camels were loaded down with gifts. Now, an arrogant Herod might have assumed that a caravan of this nature coming in with treasure surely had to be coming in to honor him. How disappointing and deflating it must have been for them to be asking, point us to the child. How can we get to him? And so this was interesting. Here comes an aha for me, that Herod then asked the same question. Where is this child? Let me know so that I can come and worship him too. Here is the aha. Two different groups of people asking the same question. Two different groups of people using the same words. That says to me that you can have people who use the same words. Perhaps it's church language, church talk, the language of the kingdom. They're using the same words, but their motives and their intent are not the same. That is the separation of true worshipers from other people. The wise men were indeed true worshipers, and Herod was not. There was also this idea of being diligent. The wise men have been diligent in their pursuit of worship, even to pack up, to be very intentional in taking something that they would be able to offer in worship and then physically making the journey. Now here's Herod instructing them to be diligent in their pursuit, but again, his motive and his intent are not the same. Here's also the wow for me and why I do not believe that the wise men were kings. Because Herod gives them instruction. He sends them, he says, you go to Bethlehem and you bring back a report to me. He had no jurisdiction over these people. They were not from his area. They were not obligated to follow anything that Herod would have told them. And so a king from anywhere else definitely would not have taken instruction from Herod to bring back a report. These wise men, as wise as they are, they don't at all clue in to the fact that Herod is not operating from an honest space, that Herod is not a good person. And so they take his direction as subjects. They accept the direction of Herod and they leave to follow instructions as they were given. In verses 9 and 10, when they departed, when they heard the king, they departed. That's that part where I say they heard his instruction and they followed them. They did what he said, although he had no jurisdiction over them. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. And so they follow this star until it comes to a place where it's standing still. It's still very interesting for me that these wise men, as book smart as they were, as wise as they were, they did not find anything odd about Herod's instruction. They seem oblivious to the fact that his motives are tainted, and they don't even realize that they've given Herod information that puts that baby in danger. So they follow the instructions as they're given. And this was sort of an aha for me, that these men have come from afar. They've made the journey. But some people will go on the journey and they will find the journey to Jesus is worth it. Whatever they had to go through to get there, the journey to Jesus was worth it. People will go on and they will find the journey to Jesus to be worth it. When they arrive at verse 11, they arrive at the house, not at the stable. There's no manger, and they don't see a baby. They see a young child and his mother, and they fall down and they worship him. Here in verses 11, I believe, through maybe 15, we see these actions and attitudes of worship. There are actually 4 things in verse 11 that we find in terms of attitude and actions in worship. The first thing is that they searched until they found him. They recognized Jesus' kingship and his divinity, and he was worth the journey. They put in the effort to search until they found him. The second thing was they fell down, recognizing again his kingship and his divinity. They lowered themselves, their posture. They fell down, and then they worshiped. They showed his worthship. That's what worship is, to acknowledge his worthship. And 3 times Matthew uses this idea, this concept of falling down and worshiping. I give you those in the TSSG notes. So they searched for him. They fell down before him, they worshiped him, and they gave. Giving is indeed a part of our worship. It's an expression that is an overflow of the heart. It's not an obligation. Giving is the joy that flows out of the heart. Here's the thing, though. They were willing to give up what was important to give to the child. In their worship, they gave up what was important and they gave their best. John 3:16, we get the idea of the most beautiful gift of giving ever, and that's God giving his son. And he gave his son out of the overflow of love. For God so loved the world that he gave. Now, they gave gifts. What were these gifts? These gifts were gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense was a very costly fragrance. It represented wisdom. It was used for special occasions. Myrrh was a prized perfume used for burial. It was a gift for a savior. And then gold was the sign of kingship. I did those out of order. So gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When I look at these wise men, I really look at their heart. So on some level, maybe they were a little bit misdirected. They got a little turned around and didn't quite go directly to Bethlehem. They were a bit naive in giving Herod a bit too much information. But they came to worship without question. The only thing they led with in getting to worship was their hearts. They put in effort to get to Jesus. That was that diligence we talked about. And it's just so interesting because when you look at who should have been worshiping Jesus, it should have been Jerusalem. It should have been Herod. He as a leader should have been the one leading out in the worship. But instead, those who came from afar, who were actually Gentiles, they were the ones that put in the effort to get to and to worship Jesus. Now, it's also interesting for me that they got to the place where the star stood still. It amazes me that for this length of time that God gave them the sign and gave them everything that they needed to get right to Jesus. When we put in the effort, when we are diligent, when our hearts are postured in the right place, God will continue to lead us until we get to that place and we can connect with him in a meaningful way. Here were some ahas again. These men did not fit the profile of those that you thought would have searched so diligently and for those who would have come to worship Jesus. There are going to be a lot of people who don't look like we think they should look. They don't come from where we think they should come from. But because of the posture of their heart, they are going to get to Jesus. Another aha, even the most bright, the most brilliant, had a need to search for Jesus. There is just something that books cannot give you. You need an encounter with Jesus. There is a time where your worldly knowledge is not enough. And finally, that even these men in all of their brilliance, they were willing to lower themselves to the lordship of Jesus Christ. No matter how brilliant we are, no matter how much we've accomplished, no matter what our net worth is, no matter what's on our financial books, we've got to be willing to submit to Jesus. In verse 12, there's a warning that's given. Now that these men have come and they've worshiped, remember their assignment was to find the baby and to come back. But in a dream, and we see that dreams are important in Matthew 5 times already. There have been dreams in the first 2 chapters. And in this dream, an angel tells these men, God warns these men to go home another way. Don't take a report back to Herod, but to go home another way. The aha for me is that a word from God keeps them out of harm's way. When we're sensitive to God and what he tells us, what he shows us, we can avoid the pitfalls. We can avoid harm and danger. So these men, they don't actually complete the assignment from Herod. They don't answer the location of the child. And this is the thing that actually sets Herod off again. It fuels that fire that we talked about in him that makes him so angry that he goes on. He's got a pattern. He gets very, very angry and he does aggressive and extreme things. So he goes on this terror, which is effectively a national genocide where he orders all babies under the age of 2, children under 2, to be killed. Again, another indicator for us that Jesus is no baby. He knows that he's a toddler. He's probably 2 years old. So anyone under 2, you've got to go because that represents a threat to the throne. Now, they've demonstrated, this was interesting for me as well. In fact, it's a takeaway that we should demonstrate a higher loyalty to God. Their loyalty was never to Herod. He didn't have jurisdiction over them. They didn't have any reason to be loyal to him, but they were going to obey. And here we see that their loyalty to God was worth more, to the point that they obeyed God. Our loyalty must be strong enough that we obey. Verses 13 through 15, they left, and then Joseph is given another dream. Again, when the Lord wants to communicate with Joseph, he sends an angel. Each time that Joseph is given a meaningful action in the life of young Jesus, it happens through a dream, and he is to take the young child and his mother. You've got to get out of here. The life of Jesus at this point has to be protected, and so he is to flee into Egypt. And you go there and you stay there, the angel says. You stay there until I come again and give you a word that Herod is dead. He's going to be gone. You're going to come back into a place of safety. And so here's Joseph again, very similar to last week's pattern. He has a dream. It gives him what to do. He gets up immediately. He doesn't interact with the angel. He doesn't ask any questions. He doesn't push back in any way. Again, he is called to embrace and to obey. We're talking about God's call. And again, inside of plans that don't make sense, things that you didn't sign up for, things that don't fit inside of your norm, God calls us to embrace and to obey. And again, he stays there until the death of Herod. The family is found once again. They're refugees again. They've been refugees before. Even at the baby's birth, there was no place for them in that area. There was no room. And now this is no place for them again. This family is on the run into a foreign space. And so they are refugees again in order to keep the promise safe. Sometimes there will be extra effort that is required to keep the promise safe. Final note I want to make is we're looking at what it means to be called by God, and how do we sort of sort through our own calls and what God is calling us to do. I want you to notice that we know at this point that Jesus is called to do a certain job. We know from last week's lesson that his name is Jesus because his job, his call, his assignment is that he's going to save his people from their sins. So a very assured thing that he is, so far, everything is lining up according to the prophecy, but calls are not without conflict. Calls are not without conflict. And even with the assignment that God gives you, remember the call that you have is you are a solution to a problem. Jesus was a solution to a problem to save his people from their sins. And even in this birth story, even in his young life, it is not without conflict. We must know that when God calls us, that we are not guaranteed a journey that is going to be of complete ease. It may not be free of people who want to kill us or want to destroy the purpose that God has put in us. It may be filled with people who are not happy about the assignment, someone who is threatened because of what God has shown you or what God has said about you, someone who will make every effort to destroy what God has placed in you. But that does not negate the call. It does not change who Jesus was. It does not change his assignment. It does not change what he will ultimately do. And we can learn the same, that just because you encounter conflict in the call, it does not change what God has assigned for you to do. We're going to continue talking about the call, and I pray that you see these wise men in new and different ways. This story of the birth of Christ. Here are my key learnings, and I'll get out of here. First, this lesson is really for all of my STEM-loving friends. When we see the math, the science inside of this lesson, we know that God used the knowledge of these wise men, but he also used their faith in bringing them to Jesus, the faith that they had in his promise. God can use all of that. He uses our brains and brilliance, and he combines it with our faith. And when we get to Jesus, he does something special. God goes through great lengths to ensure that everyone, all people, receive the good news. It's not important to simply know the word, but we must apply it. And as we look at chapter 2, the third category of people, we had the worshiper, the warrior, or the one who was concerned. And then the category that I call the I know it. That was the people around Herod. They knew the word, and yet there was no urgency to get to Jesus. It's not enough just to know the word, recite the word. We've got to be able to apply the word and to be excited and diligent about the word. Be careful who we consider insiders and outsiders. Remember, these wise men were technically considered outsiders, and yet their intensity to get to worship was more than those who were on the inside. God always has a way of meeting people right where they are and in ways that make sense to them. He communicated with these wise men through what they understood, a star. And so how does God want to reach us now? How does he want to communicate with you? I want to have a knowledge of God's promise that keeps me focused and anticipating what will happen next, and that God will do just what he says he will do. And with these men, they've watched for years for these signs to come. And here is God doing just what he said he would do. And I don't want to be thrown off by unexpected people on my path, unexpected difficulties and bumps in my journey. I want to stay focused on what God has shown me and what I know to be his promise. Next, never, like Herod, be so arrogant as to think that your role cannot be modified in light of God's plan. Never think that you're so wonderful that God's plan is not going to be executed. Don't get threatened by other people as they come in. Don't worry. Don't ever think that you are so big that you can change the things that God has set in order. Don't allow fear of losing control, whether that is leadership, title, position, power. Don't allow that to cost you your worship. That was Herod's issue. He couldn't worship for fear of title, power, control, respect. Never let those things thwart your worship. Finally, an encounter with Jesus brings joy. In this season, I pray that you will know the joy of Jesus and remember, yes, that wise men do still worship him. I love you all so much. As a reminder, I look forward to seeing you in Sunday school with your ugly Christmas sweaters, masks, dress, whatever you want to wear. Look for the Zoom link. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to all of you. Have a wonderful time. Stay safe. I know that we're in some alternate planning with our families again, but this is a time where we are truly made aware that it's not about the stuff. And it's not even about the things that we necessarily think that we want to do, but this causes us to reflect and to make sure that we have the right response to what is a holy light. I love you all. I'll see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody. This bag makes a great gift for teachers, and of course, there's a church school version as well. Visit my Etsy store for this and other great items, and look down below this video for t-shirts for all ages and sizes.
Changing the way you see Sunday school with that Sunday school.